Welcome to the rich part of town, where I'm here to drive a small car that makes you feel like you need to wear a red scarf. This is a 2008 Fiat 500, which is a relatively cheap subcompact Italian car with very cute and stylish looks. Despite being an entry-level car, the charismatic styling means that this tiny car doesn't look out of place in a parking lot full of big, expensive luxury cars. The question is there any substance behind the looks? So the interior of the Fiat 500, it's interesting, which seems to be the key word for the day. And the reason why I say that is it is made out of a lot of really scratchy, cheap, hard plastics, and some of the things aren't put together quite properly because it rattles about as you drive along. However, this car is a masterclass in how to make cheap materials just look good. Because overall, the presentation of everything in this car is absolutely beautiful. I mean, the switches and knobs definitely feel cheap, but everything just looks really nice, and this sort of body color painted plastic dash is not an expensive thing to do, and it just looks fantastic, which makes me wonder why more companies don't do that. So overall, this car actually feels really spacious despite being tiny. The seats are made out of a vinyl-y material, but they're comfortable, and you know, it's just a nice place to be, especially with this nice big sunroof on the top. Something really special about this car. It feels like being in a nice cafe. It really is just a nice place to be. Even though this is a tiny two-door car, it actually does have back seats. The question is, are they usable considering how small the car is? If you have something like a Mini Cooper, the back seats are definitely there as a decoration, but this one might be different. So let's find out. Okay, getting in is as tricky as it usually is for a two-door car, but once you're back here, it's not that bad. It's not spacious, but considering how tiny this car is, these back seats are usable for a short guy like me. I think for like even an hour journey, this would be perfectly acceptable. So there is a trunk on this tiny car, and it's not that bad considering how small this car is. As usual, I'll get inside. I kind of barely fit, but I do fit inside, unlike a Mini Cooper where I can't fit inside. And I do believe this car is smaller than a Mini Cooper, so on that front, good job. On the road in the Fiat 500. And I have an admission to make. This is the first Italian car I've ever driven. I actually have driven an Abarth 124, but technically that's made by Mazda in Hiroshima. Well, I say this is Italian, but it's actually made in Poland, but close enough. Anyways, what is it like to drive? It's loud in here. Just the road noise is hilariously loud. And the ride quality is actually not bad. Strangely, this car deals with big bumps better than it does with small bumps, which is confusing, but you know, it's not that bad to drive. However, there are a lot of quirks. So when you start off in this car, the transmission is the first thing that strikes you as odd. This is an automatic, but the transmission itself is not a torque converter automatic. It's a manual transmission that's been made to be automatic. So therefore, it's not smooth. So when we set off, You can feel clutch slippage and all sorts of things, and when it shifts like a bus driver. It genuinely just feels like someone who's just learning how to drive stick. And it's not the best, smoothest transmission in the world. It's very interesting, to say the least. It's very much a manual transmission. Like, if you let your foot off the brake pedal, it does not move forward. In fact, on a hill, it rolls backwards. This makes parking a bit interesting because, I mean, it's easier than a full-on manual where you're doing a clutch dance, but it just feels weird. It's something you can get used to, but at the same time, like I said, the shifts are not smooth. You can fix that problem by putting it into manual mode, but then, yes, the shifts are faster and smoother, but they're still not fast and they're still not smooth. So another thing to note is this car is very slow. If you want it to go quickly, you have to kind of rev the nuts off of it. And even when you do that, it's not quick. And since it's an Italian car, if you kind of rev the engine too hard, the nuts on the engine may actually come off. So best to be a bit careful. So while this is a small little city car, it is European and Italian, so you'd expect the handling to be fantastic. And it's not bad, and the steering feels good. However, it does require quite a lot of lock to turn, and it's unusually heavy for this little tiny car. And to be honest, it kind of reminds me of driving my old '94 Land Rover Discovery, the thing that I had when I was in high school. It's really strange to have such a tiny car feel like an old SUV, but it kind of does. Like, it doesn't feel quite as light and nippy as it should be, and it's just because the steering's really heavy. But I like it. Whoa, hello. Okay, in downtown Tokyo traffic now, and this little car is really coming alive. I'm usually really stressed out when I drive through downtown Tokyo, but right now, this car is fun. I can't explain it. And before, it felt a little heavy. It doesn't feel heavy right now. For whatever reason, once you get into traffic, this car just darts around. It's super fun and nimble. Normally, the handling on just open-ish roads doesn't feel that good, but in and out of traffic, this car is brilliant. So strangely, driving through downtown traffic is making me really like this car. I mean, all of the objective flaws are still there, but there's something just really likable about the characteristics of this car in traffic. It just darts in and out really smoothly, and you just kind of feel special in the car for whatever reason. It reminds me a lot about my old Land Rover Discovery that I drove in high school. Objectively, it was a terrible car. It broke down a lot. It had all sorts of issues. But for some reason, I loved it. Everyone in my family loved it, even though we really should have hated the car. And this car's kind of pulling the same trick. Objectively, there are much better cars, but there's something really endearing about this little car, and I can't really explain it. And for some reason, I started having these emotions come out in the middle of Tokyo traffic, which is not where I thought that would happen. All right, it's conclusion time for the Fiat 500. So what do I think? So this is kind of complicated because objectively this is not a good car and I would not recommend it to anyone, especially with this really strange automized manual transmission. However, driving it through Tokyo traffic, something about it has really endeared itself to me. And I know that sounds kind of cliche. A lot of car reviewers say that about Italian cars, but genuinely, there is something genuinely endearing about this car, even though there are much better cars that you can buy. So yeah, I don't recommend buying one. However, the one time where I would recommend it is if you don't have a lot of money and you do want something stylish that you can drive into the center of Tokyo and not feel poor and out of place. This car does it better than everything else.